But it is a good day. It's raining, and of course that's wonderful for people with gardens, albeit we've got a little bit of a misty, rainy backdrop today. Well, let's kick straight off with a little bit of an update in Ukraine. We want to do this very quickly, but the key factor is that, of course, the Ukrainian counteroffensive is not making any progress towards the deep Russian lines. I'd like to thank THETI mapping here. I'm trying to choose different people. There are many good analysts out there, but you can see the in-depth Russian defense lines in black on the screen. And what is happening at the moment is the Ukrainians are attacking. Losses in vehicles and men is always very high, but of course they have to keep attacking because this is the policy in their adherence to what NATO needs. So let's just pop on. This is the Avdiivka front. The yellow lines indicate Ukrainian positions, but the Ukrainians have made some minor gains here. If we bring in arrows, we can just show the areas that they've taken. If you look at the scale on the map, we're simply dealing in large field areas, and the reality is that this is not changing the battlefield at all. If we move to a different area, the Lyman front, we've gone up north a little bit here. Lyman is ringed in the light green on the left of your screen. But essentially on this part of the front, it's the Russians that have been making gains, particularly in the forested areas that you can see center screen. Some very small gains by the Ukrainians, but they are attacking. Some small gains by the Russians, who are continuing to move forward in this area at least. If we go to the Bakhmut front, which has remained important, then it is clear that the Ukrainians have taken some territory. We're talking in a kilometre or less than a kilometre. However, the Russians are still entrenched in their positions in Bakhmut. The main Russian lines, though, well to the rear of Bakhmut itself. Now, the reality of what's happening is, of course, those wonder weapons from the Germans and elsewhere in NATO has not worked. So there's now many pictures of destroyed Leopard tanks. They've been lost to mines or Russian artillery or anti-tank weapons. And it's very clear now that the tanks supplied by NATO are not going to make any difference to the outcome of the battle. But the Russians, I think we can tell from this particular video clip, delighted to be hauling in Western equipment, which has been knocked out on the battlefield. And if you think this is simply putting out the Russian line, well, let's switch to this report from Forbes, which is the reality. 25 tanks and fighting vehicles gone in a blink. The Ukrainian defeat near Tokmachka was worse than we thought. And this is really it and all about it, because the Ukrainians have had a huge loss in vehicles, and with that loss has come a huge and horrific loss in manpower. Some people are talking about casualties for the Ukrainian offensive so far as well over 10,000, but we need more reports on those. And I'll just also add that, of course, the reports of a Russian missile strike on Kramatorsk, that now does appear to have happened. It is almost certain that they hit one of the Ukrainian command and control centers, and there were not only Ukrainian generals present, 2 are mentioned, certainly in Russian reports, but there were also some 50 killed, including, it would appear, NATO and/or mercenary troops. So,
and just to clarify, that was the pizza shop?
That was the pizza shop. So effectively, people who were involved in the command center were obviously taking their meals in the nearby pizza house, but this appeared to become known to the Russians who targeted the whole facility.
Well, let's welcome Patrick to the program and say Zelenskyy had a very special guest a few days ago.
Absolutely. Taking a break from the much vaunted spring/summer offensive to receive an esteemed delegation of various Eurocrats and WAF acolytes here. We'll play this clip. And Greta Thunberg, of all people, has made landfall in Kyiv. This is a very exciting confab. We'll talk about what they're up to in just a moment, but here is the meeting and greeting session.
It's really very important signal of supporting Ukraine. It's very important, and really we need your help, your professional help. And I spoke with my team. You had a good conversation. I thank you very much for video format, which we had together. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. It's very important have to have this. You made the decision about this compact of very concrete steps. We've been there in Kherson region, in Mykolaiv region, and a lot of cities. I think
he was struggling to find the words there, Patrick.
Just incredible, Patrick. Incredible video.
Yeah, Zelenskyy seemed a bit disheveled and confused. Could have been a long night, who knows? But here's the team photo here, and we just make note here, highlight the positioning. I always look at the blocking of these photos and the way they've got Greta positioned. I would expect that she would be next to Zelenskyy, but of course, if they did that, it might reveal that she's in fact taller than Zelenskyy himself. So again, the optics are always something that they're paying very close attention to here. But let's get to the task at hand. Now, why is this meeting happening? This is all about environmental degradation in Ukraine at the hands of the evil Russians. This is why this confab is happening. So they're surveying all the various environmental damage and all the evils done by the evil Putin and the Russians on this. It's we're wondering if they're going to bring up these particular incidents here. We'll bring on screen the Nord Stream sabotage. So arguably, this was the largest man-made methane release in history, and received wisdom is that Russia attacked itself. At least that's the Western line, but they have actually pivoted towards it could have been a Ukrainian rogue cell. Nobody's quite sure. It's all basically left really in the gray zone of the information war. Next on the environmental rap sheet here, the Kharkovka Dam. Again, Russia's attacked itself. Strange, once again, strange. This was a huge ecological and humanitarian disaster that's affected downstream water supplies for the people of Crimea. Plus, the reservoir upstream is completely dry as well, as is downstream. So, huge environmental disaster. And of course, last but not least, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. This is the big talking point at the moment. Big concern about whether Russia's going to, again, attack itself. This is the party line from Kyiv and NATO. And Russia's going to attack itself and cause some kind of a nuclear incident or a nuclear explosion. I know it doesn't make any sense and it seems counterintuitive, but this is the party line at the moment in Kyiv and in NATO as well. So that brings us to this issue, and it is quite a controversial issue. If you remember the coup that wasn't a coup over the weekend, the previous 72 hours ahead of that, there was this big buildup. Zelenskyy was tweeting about Zaporizhzhia, saying Russia's planning to do some kind of a nuclear explosion or something like that. Lindsey Graham, Richard Blumenthal, senators doing a press conference saying this is going to be a violation of Article 5, etc. It was building up to a crescendo, and all of a sudden, the oxygen was sucked out of it with the Prigozhin Russian MOD coup that wasn't a coup drama. So it's interesting, but let's look at the actual receipts here. Russia is actually on record. This is earlier. This was just about a week ago, asking the International Atomic Energy Agency to ensure the safety of this plant. Why? Because Russia's raising the alarm, and they showed them this at the inspection, which we covered 2 weeks ago, that they've urged the IAEA to ensure that Ukraine does not shell the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, because they showed their representatives the damage caused by Ukrainian shelling just recently. So this has been made official. So there's a bit of a battle going on here with propaganda and counter propaganda, you could say. But looking at the receipts, we saw the footage. It does seem like Ukraine is shelling the plant and has been doing for quite some time. That plant's being guarded by Russian troops. So Russia has operational control of their nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia. There's only one reactor that we know of that's still working, but it's not at 100%. Russia has also been moving spent fuel rods and waste from the facility to avoid any type of incident, of course. But again, discard all that. The received wisdom in the West is Russia's planning to attack itself. I know it's strange. So, but this is the story that didn't get much press coverage, which I think is perhaps important. Russia has detained, this was last week, they detained smugglers. So Russian smugglers who had obtained Caesium 137 from somewhere, paid $3.5 million. And this is Russian, the FSB in Russia. They've detained it and they arrested these people, a kilogram Caesium 137, on behalf of a Ukrainian citizen. And the implication here is that this is going to be used to make a dirty bomb. And so that's the accusation there. Of course, Ukraine has denied any wrongdoing in this. So this was interesting, the timing of this. So are we looking at a potential false flag attack here? I think it's worth raising the issue, of course. So, and again, no coverage of this in the Western mainstream media other than this Reuters article, which is actually syndicated from TASS news. But notice that Reuters did cover it. So that's significant, I think. But I would think the Western mainstream would jump all over this, don't you think? If it was fake news?
You would think so. You would think so, absolutely, Patrick. But it doesn't end there, because here is a report from Yahoo News and the fact that in various parts of Ukraine around Zaporizhzhia, the authorities are holding evacuation drills amid a possible terrorist attack at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, because, of course, as you say, the narrative is that Russia is going to attack itself. Well, it doesn't just end with evacuations. Here we have a little bit of video from a tweet where which you provided me earlier on, so thanks for this, where they are apparently decontaminating somebody and running exercises in decontamination anyway. But we should not forget that, of course, this whole narrative about Russia attacking itself with respect to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the idea came from Russia in the first place, or at least this is where a lot of the sort of momentum for this idea came from in the Western press and so on. They published this in April, Dangerous Targets, Civilian Nuclear Infrastructure and the War in Ukraine. And they said Russia may manufacture a radiological incident at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant or other facility to spoil a Ukrainian offensive. The West should make clear to Russia that any such incident would be followed by a massive response to mitigate damage. Well, one thing that this report seems to have fed into then was the congressional resolution that Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal introduced on the 22nd of June. And they went as far as to say that if Russia used nuclear weapons in Ukraine or attacked the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, it would effectively result in Russia being at war with NATO and so on. So they were attempting, I guess, to bring Article 5 back into the picture again. But if we come back to this Yahoo News article again, I just wanted to highlight that, of course, they didn't write this because Yahoo News doesn't write news. They syndicate from various other places. This article originally came from the New Voice of Ukraine. And so I just wanted to highlight this particular website. So here it is here. This is the same article on the New Voice for Ukraine website. But who is the New Voice for Ukraine? They say about themselves, NV is an independent media holding founded in 2014 by a team of professional journalists. Today, the holding includes the NV Weekly News magazine, the NV.ua news website, the Radio NV nationwide talk radio station, and panel discussions. The New Voice of Ukraine was launched as the English version of NV.ua website in early 2022. But who are they working with? Well, let's have a look. The usual suspects. So we've got The Economist, the New York Times, the BBC, Deutsche Welle, and they say that in addition, we operate with the Aspen Institute Kyiv, Deloitte, Hay Group, the European Business Association, the American Chamber of Commerce, Internews, Content Fund, the US Embassy of Ukraine, and the International Republican Institute. So Patrick and Brian, Patrick first, my first question here is, this article that was published about the evacuations and so on seems to be, Yahoo is the only Western media organization that has picked that up, but it's come from this organization which seems like it's heavily supported by other Western media organizations, so it can't be independent. But again, it sort of feeds the narrative that the Russians are about to attack themselves. So if there is an incident involving Zaporizhzhia, then undoubtedly this article is going to frame some of the explanation for what's going on there.
And what Yahoo News has done is they've carved out a whole piece of prime real estate right across their whole website for the new voice of Ukraine. So this is clearly a propaganda outlet construct. If you probably look at the funding, I'm sure there's Soros money, U.S. Embassy, etc., maybe even BBC Media Action. I wouldn't be surprised. But
Yes.
This is just a propaganda window that's carved out of Yahoo News. Amazing that a major mainstream outlet would allow such partisan propaganda to be parked all over its website like that.
Yes, and go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add, you picked up quite rightly BBC Media Action there, just to remind viewers that it was BBC Media Action with Deutsche Welle, that was the German company shown on screen there, that set up Suspilny, the Ukrainian government media. So it's a pretty poisonous little nest.
I just wanted to highlight this from Rebecca Harris, Member of Parliament for Castle Point, because she says that we've got to, whenever we want to support Ukraine, we've got to stay safe online. And one simple step is to make sure we only go to the proper sources, including the Kyiv Independent and the New Voice of Ukraine. So those are the key places to go. But Patrick, let's move on then to this. Ukraine, also from Yahoo, Ukraine to hold elections after the war ends. Does that mean they're not holding any elections in the meantime?
Well, we've been told that this war is all about, we're fighting for democracy, right? In Ukraine. This is the raison d'etre, isn't it, for the whole proxy war, NATO's efforts and everything. So apparently they're not going to be holding any elections in the near future because Zelenskyy has decreed that there can't be elections. I guess it's in the constitution of Ukraine. There can't be elections if there's martial law, and martial law will likely be renewed in August. I think it's on a 90-day rolling renewal, and he claims that it's probably going to be renewed. So they're only going to be able to have elections after they win the war. Okay, so this is a little bit disturbing because there's really no military path to victory that we can see. Obviously, looking at our coverage over the weeks, that becomes pretty clear. And we're not the only outlet saying that. And at the same time, there's no moves for negotiations, not by any of the NATO partners, nor from Kyiv itself. So again, this is going to be an open-ended conflict. So there's to speak of, no democracy on the cards for Ukraine. And to add to that, churches are being shuttered, who are being suspected of being sympathetic to Russia, major religious bodies and churches. The media has been taken under state control. Any independent media that don't comply are shut down. Journalists are being imprisoned, not just Gonzalo Lira, who we've mentioned previously, the American journalist in Kharkiv, but also numerous Ukrainian journalists who were nabbed at the onset of this conflict back in 2022. So not only that, we have forced conscription of all men 18 to 60 years old. And a lot of these are from ethnic oblasts as well. They're not from Lviv. They're not doing as much forced conscription on the streets of Lviv. So you could say there's a bit of an ethnic cleansing operation going on in that respect. So all in all, this is not a good look for democracy in Ukraine. And so Zelenskyy basically has said, if we win, there will be elections. That's from the horse's mouth himself. So again, what are we actually fighting for? What is this proxy war really about? This is definitely not about democracy. I don't think you can make that argument right now.
Yes, and just to finish, just to highlight that this article is also picked up from the New Voice of Ukraine as well.
That's correct.
For some reason, they put that in the Yahoo Entertainment section.
Filed under the entertainment section, Mike. You couldn't make it up. That might just be because it's a Zelenskyy article, and that's where it should be housed. But I thought that's worth pointing out.
Yes. Okay.